Hold on, an error occurred.
No, I think we're live.
All right.
Yeah.
We're live. Sorry for the delay, everybody. A little bit of technical difficulties we're battling through as usual on Biscuits and SEC, unfortunately. But we're here. It is Wednesday night, February 19th. Thank you for joining us. We got a good show up ahead over the next hour. It's our 19th live show, so thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Tell your friends. We'll be here every Wednesday, for the foreseeable future, I guess, through the off season, and then we'll discuss when the season rolls around. But we've got a while to go before that. So this week we're going to be grading the rest of the teams that we did not get to last week. So it's basically the old SEC East with Oklahoma added in there. So if you're new, we are Biscuits and SEC. I'm Hammer. That's Bossman. You can see below we've got a link to sign up for our newsletter. We do that once a week during the off season, twice a week during the season. But for now, it'll be every Wednesday where we just send the latest news and updates from the SEC straight to you for free. So would appreciate if you guys would sign up for that. And if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe. So without further ado, I think we can get into this. How are you doing tonight, Alex, Bossman? How's it going?
I'm good. Sorry, everybody, for the slight delay there. I was caught up in the green room. They told me they needed a little bit more time to make this face look pretty for TV. So it took me a little longer to get ready for tonight, but here we are. Looking forward to it. Hope everybody out there is staying warm. I know across the SEC footprint right now, it is frickin' freezing, as they would say in the wonderful Austin Powers movies from yesteryear. It is freezing right here in Austin, Texas, where I am. It was 6 degrees, or felt like 6 degrees when I woke up this morning. Now, I can't talk much. It's been a lot colder for you, Hammer, out there in Colorado. But, yes, please definitely sign up for the newsletter below. I don't think you'll regret it. All the SEC latest news there. And then check us out at Biscuits and SEC across social media platforms. And then other than that, I'm looking forward to a great show tonight. It's fun ranking the teams, looking back at the 2024 season. We got a lot to get into, so we can get right to it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think to start this out here, like I said, we'll be going through kind of the old SEC East. So I'll kick it to you to get us started with a perennial bottom dweller, although not so much this year with the Vanderbilt Commodores. So it looks like we got some sweet graphics for this. I'll pop this up on the screen here and let you take it from there.
Yeah, so Vanderbilt this year, I like to grade these teams based upon their preseason expectations and where they finished. And also base it really on what the fan base was thinking, right? What the fan base was thinking preseason, and kind of mix that a little bit with what the national media was discussing in terms of where they thought these teams would finish. So for me, you can see there, the SEC, the preseason odds for Vanderbilt, 16th, right? They finished 12th in the SEC, and that might look a little bit deceiving in terms of the year they really had. They finished the year over 500, 7-6 on the year. And while they weren't ranked to start the year, and then they weren't ranked at the final AP Top 25, they were ranked at two different points during the season, in the middle of the season, and then also were, receiving votes. Others receiving votes, I believe, twice during the year. Now, for Vanderbilt, that's a big deal, right? We're talking about a team that was way in the dumps, the year before in 2023, having regressed seriously in the Clarkley era. I think they only won two games in 2023. So coming into this year, not a whole lot of optimism. They get this, whatever quarterback in the transfer portal with Diego Pavia. Yeah, he's done a little bit in New Mexico. Who knows what the heck is going to go on there. They lost a lot in the transfer portal. So who knows? What is this going to look like, right? In fact, they lost their quarterback, A.J. Swan, to LSU, who'd been there for a couple years. There was just a lot of unknowns going into this year. So for them to beat Alabama, never done in program history, an incredible win that they get. And then the students, the fan base for Vanderbilt, Nashville was kind of a buzz they were excited about this football team, and there's momentum going in now to 2025. So I think Clark Lee and this team absolutely exceeded expectations for this season. And also, they wanted momentum going into next year. That's all you could really ask for from where this Vanderbilt team started coming out of 2023. So for me, the only thing that doesn't give them an A+ is the fact that they lost to, I think it was Georgia State. Was it Georgia State earlier in the year? One of those Georgia teams that they're not supposed to lose to, Georgia State or Georgia Southern. And so they could get an A+ had they been, 8-4, say, instead of 7-6. But at the end of the day, this was a fantastic season for Vanderbilt, way above expectations. So for me, they get an A. I think Clark Lee did a fantastic job this year.
Yeah, no disagreement on that for me. I think you hit on pretty much everything. And as you alluded to right at the end there, they did finish 6-6. So it's not like a record-breaking year. But given where they were before Clark Lee got there, and even in his early tenure, for them to get back to a bowl game and, as you mentioned, get a win over Alabama, I think deserves an A. It's really hard, honestly, for Vanderbilt to go 6-6 and not give them an A. I do think there's, certainly years where, maybe they beat up on a bad schedule or something and could get there. But given the disadvantages that program is faced with relative to their conference counterparts across the SEC, 6-6 is always going to be a good year at Vandy. And with Diego Pavia, with the excitement that they had this year that you brought up, I think an A is absolutely deserved.
And not to mention, too, the bowl game. You get a bowl game win at Vanderbilt, that's always a good year. And they beat a Georgia Tech team that, while on paper, if you're just looking Georgia Tech, well, okay, Georgia Tech hasn't been that good. But anyone that really watched college football this year knows that Georgia Tech was in a very similar vein to Vanderbilt. Much improved football team. They look really good under Brent Key. And with Haynes King, that team was formidable. And Haynes King is a baller, just like Diego Pavia. They're cut from the same cloth. Those guys are winners. They've got a winner's mentality. And while they may not be the most talented, right, in terms of their arm strength or what have you, those guys win ball games and they're leaders. So for Vanderbilt to get that win against Georgia Tech in the bowl game was also big, especially when you remember that Georgia Tech nearly beat Georgia. I forget what it was, 8 overtimes, 7 overtimes, 6, whatever it was.
8, I think.
8, right, because we changed the overtime rules. So 8 overtimes to almost get Georgia. They had them, too, that Georgia Tech team did, and Vanderbilt beat them in the bowl game. So solid year for Clark Lee and the boys in Nashville.
Yeah, love it. Good stuff. I'm excited to see what happens in 2025 with Pavia back, thanks to the NCAA not being able to win a court case. So we will stick in the great state of Tennessee for our next program grade. And obviously I am referring to the Tennessee Vols. So I'll be handing out their grade, and I gave them an A. So you can see here on this graphic, right, they exceeded their SEC preseason odds, finished 3rd, were predicted to finish 6th, and they began the season in the AP ranked 15th and finished number 9 inside the top 10. Big win against Alabama. They really kind of just took care of business this year. They had the one slip up at Arkansas, but Arkansas is always pesky, and a night game in Fayetteville is not an easy place to play. So I just looked at this and thought it didn't end, of course, how the Vols would like. That was a pretty sound defeat in Columbus. But all things considered, Ohio State went on to win the national title and kind of smoked everybody in the playoff. But also, one game at the end of the season to me doesn't define the season, right? If we're given a season-long grade here, it's got to be an A. Tennessee goes 10-2, 6-2 in the SEC, makes the college football playoff very comfortably. There was zero doubt they were going to make it. There was no debate. They were just in. And when you look at, where this program was before Heupel got there, I know they have a storied history and they have expectations that are higher than just or aspirations maybe that are higher than just making a college football playoff and then exiting in round one. But for this season, this snapshot, I don't really know, other than, again, maybe winning a playoff game, how they could have done any better. So that's really the only thing I dinged them for was, not making a run. But I think an A is a reasonable grade. And another thing I want to call out before I'll kick it over to you is this was a different Tennessee team. They did not win scoring a ton of points. They did not have a Hendon Hooker type of a quarterback. Nico was very green. It turns out he was not really ready, probably, in a lot of respects, to be an SEC starting quarterback. He took some lumps this year. He's still got a ton of potential, a ton of talent, and he's got a ton of eligibility. So I expect him to improve moving forward. But this year, he just was not quite ready. And Heupel and his staff and that team just adjusted, right? I think coming into the year, you say Tennessee goes 10-2. Most people would say, great, Nico's going to have a great year. Well, he didn't really. Turns out Dylan Sampson had a great year, led the SEC in rushing, and Tennessee had a great defense. So that impressed me, the way that they were able to win in a little bit of a different fashion than we have seen a Josh Heupel team win in the past, be that at UCF or his prior teams at Tennessee. So I think this was a great season in Knoxville and an A. What are your thoughts here?
I think that's pretty fair. Really, I want to go B+ here, which sounds crazy, right? Because how do you not give a team that made the college football playoff an A? But I would ding them maybe just, a half or a quarter of a point, a third of a point here to go B+, because maybe it was the style points. This was definitely the best defensive team that Josh Heupel has had at Tennessee. But the offensive production, other than the running game, Dylan Sampson had a fantastic year for the Vols. But I think that Vols fans, if you ask them blind test before the season, you're going 10-2 and making the playoff. They'd take that every year, right? But I do think that that Vols fans are expecting more, and they expected more on two fronts. One, from Nico in the passing game, and two, to get past the first round. I think this fan base at this point expects to be near or competing in the national title game. And they've got the talent to do that. They're beating Alabama now, right? We've beaten Alabama 2 out of 3 years. Like, this trajectory was going very, very quickly up. And so I think from an expectation standpoint of the fan base, I probably would put a B-, a B+, especially when you consider, I know they were the national champions, but we've talked about it before on the show. Like, yes, Ohio State was the national champions. Ohio State deserved to be the national champions. Uber talented team, most talented team in the country. Surprised they didn't go wall to wall, right? And not lose a game this year, but they did. They lost a couple games. Will Howard showed that he was vulnerable. I was just surprised at the egg that Tennessee laid in Neyland North. And so with that going on, it's hard for me to give an A, even though they made the college football playoff. I know that's crazy to say that they aren't getting an A from me, even though they made the CFP. But I just think that with the expectation of the fan base, where those expectations are, and not having the blind test, now you can see the whole picture. I think fans expected more out of this team from Tennessee, especially out of the quarterback position.
I think that's fair. My only pushback there would be on that Ohio State note. That was just a tough draw. As you mentioned, of course, Ohio State went on to win the title, but I think Tennessee would have matched up a lot better with even an Oregon or a Penn State. There's a lot of other teams, really anybody, frankly, in that playoff picture that I think Tennessee, not to say they would have won, but I think they would have given a much better game. They just ran into the wrong team at the wrong time, as did Oregon, as did I guess Notre Dame and Texas, although they gave them better games. But that's my only point. But that's fair. I think you're right in terms of the fan expectations. I feel like kind of similar to last week. I'm probably maybe a little more lenient on some of these, and I try to. It's interesting because on one hand I try to like take the year as a snapshot, and then on the other hand I do in the back of my head factor in like past seasons, right? And so with that in there, I was like, yeah, I'll give them an A for that. But I see your point there. Well, anyway, we've gotten two good.
I'll just say this too. We'll move on really quickly, but I'll say this: like decade snapshot this season for Tennessee, A+.
Right.
But with this is a what have you done for me lately sport, and with Tennessee fans, I can tell you right now, that's out the window. We're not thinking about the last 8 years. We're thinking about right now, and Josh Heupel has us right on the cusp, and so we expect to be on the cusp.
Sure. And I think, to take this moving forward, if they repeat next year, 10-2 playoff, early exit, it would not be an A, I don't think.
Yeah.
So time will tell how the Vols do in 2025. But we've given out 2 very good grades so far to the teams in the state of Tennessee. How about we go over to the newcomers, Oklahoma. And I don't know what the actual grade is here, but I assume it's not going to be an A. So let's see what Bossman came up here with Oklahoma. He gave them a D. All right, take it away.
Yeah, sorry, Oklahoma fans. This season was just a mess. I don't even know where to start, really. Okay, you own the state of Alabama. Congratulations. It was the win over Alabama was the best thing that happened to Oklahoma all year. Auburn, great, whatever. But frankly, you probably should have lost that game too. If folks remember, Peyton Thorne gave that game away in the second half to Oklahoma. So while you win 2 SEC games, both against teams in the state of Alabama, you also lose multiple games in humiliating fashion. Against Tennessee, you take out Jackson Arnold and end up kind of playing this game of back and forth at the quarterback position for, a little bit of the year, a couple games, and then you go back to Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold ends up transferring at the end of the year. Brent Venables' defense was pretty solid for the most part, but they just couldn't figure it out at quarterback. They couldn't figure it out on the offensive side of the ball. You fire Seth Luttrell middle of the year, early in the year. It was just a mess, complete mess overall. And frankly, I think it started in the offseason when they decided to go with Jackson Arnold over Dylan Gabriel. And Jackson Arnold, I'm not ready to give up on that kid. I think he could be solid at Auburn. We've talked about it with, our friend Stephen Willis of Locked on Ole Miss. He thinks the same thing. He saw Jackson Arnold play at the Under Armour All-America game when he was in high school and said this kid, is incredible. He's got incredible talent. His ceiling is super high. I think that's still the case. I just don't think at Oklahoma they used him well. But they had a guy in Dylan Gabriel who got him to 10 wins. And he goes to Oregon. And I don't know what the whole thing is there. I have a feeling that it was kind of a combination of money and knowing that if you didn't start Jackson Arnold, he was probably going to transfer anyway. But it was obvious that Jackson Arnold just wasn't ready this year, or that Oklahoma didn't necessarily use him correctly. So that got you right out of the gate on a bad foot. And then from there, you just had issue after issue, whether it was the offensive line, complete mess, complete Swiss cheese, something that folks throughout the college football sphere were talking about, like Oklahoma's offensive line, watch out, they're not that good. They were terrible. And then the wide receiver position, this isn't their fault, but they had, almost their entire starting wide receiver set out for the first 5-6 games. And then, a couple more just dinged up constantly throughout the year. So overall, it was just a disastrous year. You don't ever expect to see, Oklahoma here at whatever they were, 6-7 and losing to Navy, in a bowl game. So overall, I think you could get really close to giving them an F on this year. But for me, I'll give them a D, especially really just for that win against Alabama.
Yeah, I think I would probably lean closer to F for them. Nothing really to add. I think you hit on everything. I just, in my opinion, that program, it doesn't matter what conference you are in or really any of the outstanding, outside circumstances, like 6-6, 6-7 with a bowl loss is pretty much an F. And I think you're right. I do think the wide receiver injuries really hurt, and that's not anything that is the coaches or the players' fault. But what really takes this from a D to an F to me is not just the 6-6 record, but kind of what you mentioned with the stuff around it, right? Venables hires Seth Luttrell. He doesn't even make it half of one season. That was just a bad hire, right? No two ways about it. Bad hire. They bench Arnold. That doesn't work out. They go back to Arnold. It was just, there was no continuity. And so it was not only a 6-6, 6-7 finish. It was a discombobulated 6-6, 6-7. Like, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, over the offseason with Venables because he is squarely on the hot seat. But it very much seemed like somehow, they were not ready for the SEC or really even this season, because had they been in the Big 12, I'm not sure, they maybe win 8 games, but that again is well below expectations. So for whatever reason, coming into this year with the hires and what they did, I did not think it was very, prudent, a lot of the decisions they made. And so I'd probably give an F, but I think a D is fair.
Their schedule was also brutal this year, and that's Florida's was probably the most brutal, I think, in the conference, but right up close to them was Oklahoma. They did not do any. The SEC scheduling offers gave Texas 2 gifts. One was giving them the easiest schedule in the SEC, and 2 was giving Oklahoma the probably second toughest schedule in the SEC. So maybe Bama. Bama might have had an argument there to be close to Florida there. But anyway, all that to say, yeah, Oklahoma, tough year. Gotta have a lot of momentum. Got to get a lot of things right going into 2025 in order to right the ship there for Brent Venables.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we'll keep on trucking here and head a little bit, I guess, northeast of Oklahoma slightly for another pretty bad grade here in the Kentucky Wildcats, which I looked into. So I gave them a D-, was very close to an F, but they saved themselves with the upset win over Ole Miss back in, I think that might even have been September. It was either that or very first week of October. But that was really the only thing that that saved them from an F. You look at their preseason odds, finished, picked 12th, finished 15th. So not a gigantic fall, but there's 16 teams in the SEC, and they finished 15th, only ahead of Mississippi State. So not good at all. Blowout losses galore, including to their rival Louisville at the end of the season, which really stings. They've actually kind of owned that rivalry, but that seems to be turning a little bit. I think Jeff Brom is a good coach, and he's got some things figured out at Louisville, and not really sure where things are headed with Mark Stoops. And I think a lot of the Kentucky fans would sort of echo that statement. But just looking at this year and not, speculating on how or what Stoops' future is there, very disastrous season. Brock Vandegrift, they bring him in from Georgia, former 4 or 5 star, I don't recall, but high level recruit. Sat the bench at Georgia a couple of years, bided his time, and ended up at Kentucky. And I really don't know what happened. That just did not work at all. Their offensive line was not good. They didn't have a running game. They had 2 really good receivers, in my opinion, in Dane Key and Barian Brown, who were just totally ineffective all year. Both entered the portal after the season. Their defense was okay at times, but very inconsistent. And I feel like that was kind of just the tale of the season, right? Where they had the big, upset win over Ole Miss. They nearly beat Georgia, lost 13-12. But then other games where you would have expected them, I mean, we can pull their schedule up here real fast, like other games where you would have expected them to win or at least be competitive, they weren't, right? I mean, you lose to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's better, but that's not a good loss. 31-6 to South Carolina. What the heck? 48-20 to Florida. 24-10 to Auburn. Like, you know, they're losing these games that when Kentucky is good under Mark Stoops, you know, they at the very least they're competitive in those games and they're not losing by double digits, and that's what they did this year for the most part. So, like I said, I would have given them an F had they not beaten Ole Miss. So with that, I'll give them a D-, but really, really bad year in Lexington.
Yeah, not a lot to add for me. I'm spot on with you. D-, I think is right. Tough year for former Texas A&M coach Mark Stoops.
Yes.
I think it really starts there. You know, it's really funny how things changed in the span of a couple months. Mark Stoops is basically about to get on a plane to go to College Station to be the next head coach at Texas A&M. And now I think we're here at the end of the season. Well, Kentucky fans were kind of begging him to stay. They wanted him to stay in Kentucky. Totally understandable. He's been the best head coach that Kentucky's had in many, many years, decades, and maybe ever, frankly. He's right up there, definitely in the conversation now for the best head coach that Kentucky football has ever had. But they wanted him to stay, and now we're looking, and I think that they wish that he had gotten on the plane to go to A&M after what we saw this year. And I said earlier in the show, we all know this is a what have you done for me lately business. So, hey, maybe it was just 1 year, but what have you done for me lately? And lately it is ugly. It was really ugly this year. And I think you have to wonder if the transfer quarterback, you know, pipeline that Mark Stoops has had over the last couple of years, and it's worked out for him at times when, you know, Will Levis, overall generally a decent career at Kentucky, you know, for his 1 year there. Then though you bring in, what was the kid from NC State? Devin Leary. I was about to say Dennis Leary, but that's one of my favorite actors, not Dennis Leary, Devin Leary, who really didn't live up to the hype at all. And then now we're second year in a row here. Brock Vandegrift comes in, former 5-star, didn't really see much time at Georgia. Total bust. Didn't do well. Early in the year, it looked like there was some sparks, maybe potentially, even though they got absolutely crushed by South Carolina, which folks were not expecting. In fact, I picked Kentucky in that game after watching South Carolina nearly lose to Old Dominion. But I just don't know if Liam Cohen's been gone now. Like the whole thing on the offensive side of the ball, Scangarello was fired a couple years ago. It's been a mess on the offensive side of the ball for a couple years now. And I don't know if that's going to get any better. And I think that Stoops is starting to wear out his welcome a little bit there. Frankly, we're kind of getting into a Calipari situation, I think, where, you know, the expectations have been raised now, and now you're not meeting your own expectations. And while you might be a great coach, while you might have done a lot of good at Kentucky, it might be time for some fresh blood. And I think this year, there's a lot going into next year, a lot riding on next year, a lot riding on former Texas A&M quarterback Zach Calzada's shoulders.
That's right. Legend.
Another transfer quarterback coming in. So I think D- is spot on here for Kentucky. It was a pretty dismal season, except for that Ole Miss win early in the season and playing Georgia right to the wire there early in the year. But other than that, there was not a whole lot of fun being had in Lexington.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all that. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens 2025 with Zach Calzada coming in from, formerly Texas A&M was at Division III Incarnate Word out of San Antonio the last few years, lit it up to his credit, and earned, another SEC job. I guess I wouldn't say 100% that job is his, but it seems to be. So very interesting, guy to bet on with so much riding on the season. So very, very fascinated to see how that goes for Stoops and the Wildcats. We'll get back on the good side of the report card here with a trip to Columbia, South Carolina, not Missouri. and we will check in on Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks.
All right. I gave the Gamecocks an A-, and I think, again, going back to the start of the show here, for folks who joined us a little bit late, I'm really grading this based on the fan expectations going into the season, right? And then also a little bit of the national media mixed in. So preseason odds here, folks, including myself, we're not expecting a whole lot out of South Carolina this year. Looking at transfers, looking at the issues that they had on the offensive line in 2023, breaking in a new quarterback. There were so much unknowns that I think a lot of folks, including myself and including the fan base, I know the fan base was high on Lenora Sellers, but I don't think that if you asked most of them that they thought that the Gamecocks would finish 8th in the SEC, would be right on the verge of a college football playoff berth, would have Alabama on the ropes, would have multiple big wins, including Texas A&M, beating Missouri late in the year, beating their rival Clemson, and having LSU on the ropes early in the year as well. Frankly, should have won that game. SEC officiating stole that game from the Gamecocks. So for me, I think Shane Beamer did an incredible job this year, from getting Rocket Sanders out of the portal. Rocket Sanders played a heck of a season at running back for the Gamecocks. Lenora Sellers, breaking in Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers towards the back half of the year looked like he's going to be he's an early Heisman favorite. He's in the conversation for the Heisman in 2025, as he should be, especially when he broke out against A&M. After that A&M game, it was like, okay, like maybe he's starting to figure this out. Still a couple of speed bumps late in the year, like the Illinois game, during the bowl game. But overall, this season for South Carolina, you go 9-4 with a bowl win, and you go 5-3 in the SEC. You push Alabama to the limit. Your one bad loss really was against Ole Miss, and that one seemed like kind of a fluke, an anomaly. Ole Miss just crushed them. But other than that, great year for Shane Beamer. I got to give him a lot of credit. I did not think that I thought Shane Beamer would be hanging on by a thread if he was still in Columbia at the end of this year. Totally proved me wrong. I think he's probably one of the best coaches in the SEC at this point, and he did a fantastic job. If you have South Carolina from where they were the previous year now to right on the verge of the college football playoff, you've done a hell of a job. So for me, it's an A-.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I would even maybe give them an A. Certainly not an A+, but I think you could even bump them up there. I mean, the things that I look at, you mentioned Lenora Sellers. That surprised me. I was really not bought in. As you said, the fan base was bought in. I thought that was like, fan hopium, frankly, because I just didn't buy into it, especially what we saw in that opening game against Old Dominion. I thought, okay, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
And he totally proved us wrong. And I think too, you mentioned the LSU and the Ole Miss games. If I'm correct here, those were like back-to-back. There may have been a bye mixed in, but it was early in the year, and he got hurt in the LSU game and returned. He played in the Ole Miss game, but I'm not sure he was 100%. So
true.
When he got healthy late in the year, there was a couple-week stretch. He was the best quarterback in the league, which absolutely did not see coming. Extremely impressive, not only for him just individually, but that staff to play to his strengths, set up an offense that he was comfortable with, because he's still not, we'll see what he does next year, but he's not a great thrower. He's not somebody who's going to throw the ball, 40 times for 5 touchdowns and 350 yards. But that coaching staff did a good job of just playing to his strengths, putting him in positions to succeed, and he capitalized on it, which was extremely impressive. And then the only other thing I'll add that, I don't think gets talked about enough is they beat Clemson. I believe they have also beat Clemson now 2 out of the last 3 years. And I know Clemson is not the Clemson of, say 2016 to 2020 when they won a couple titles, but Clemson won the ACC, went to the playoff, played decently against Texas, and that game was in Death Valley in Clemson. So they went on the road and beat a college football playoff team, their arch rival, which is very impressive and matters a lot to that fan base, especially because the vast majority of Dabo Swinney's tenure at Clemson South Carolina has been getting their teeth kicked in. So for Shane Beamer to kind of turn that tide and at least, level the scales of late, I think is a really big feather in his cap. And yeah, I have no problem with an A- for the Gamecocks this year. Okay. Well, let's see. Who do we have left here? You know what we can do? I think this one will go fairly quick. We'll see what you think, but we do have a couple of segments to close out tonight. We didn't do the Biscuit of the Week last week or Muschamp Coach of the Week, but they are returning as we've got some developments there. So we'll try to keep this at an hour and get through the next couple here. So I'll go with Georgia. I gave them an A-. They, were projected to win the SEC. They did. So I don't know what the second finish is there. I guess they didn't make it as far as Texas in the CFP, and their ranking was probably behind them. But, they won the SEC title in Atlanta, finished 6th in the AP, were a top 4 seed, had a bye in the college football playoff. So I gave them an A-. Obviously, at Georgia, expectations are sky high. They expect to win the SEC, to compete for national titles. I just thought the way the season unfolded was a little strange, and I wouldn't be surprised, right, if some people would dock them a little bit. But I just have a problem at some level with docking teams for winning, because Georgia won a lot of ugly games this year, but they won. They went 10-2. They won the SEC, which matters to Georgia. It matters to me as a fan. I think it matters to that fan base. And they were a top 4 seed in the college football playoff, meaning they would have made the playoff in the old format. So I think, all things considered, if you're grading on like a scale of how good did they look or how flashy were they, they're probably not an A or even an A-. But when looking at the whole package here, I'm just thinking this is an A, right? They other than, making a deep playoff run and winning or really competing for a national title, they kind of hit all their goals, and they did it, in the SEC title game with Gunnar Stockton playing the second half and coming back to beat Texas. And I think that played into the playoff loss, right? Give credit to Notre Dame for beating them, but for all of Carson Beck's struggles this year, he was a better quarterback at the time than Gunnar Stockton. So if he plays in that game, I do think there's a good chance that Georgia could have won and moved into the semifinals, and then, who knows from there. But overall, I thought, again, I'm going to dock them for not making a deep run, but hard for me to dock them too much when they win the SEC and secure a top 4 seed and a bye in the playoff. But interested to hear your thoughts, because I think this one could kind of go, either way.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here. I think you could give them an A-. You make the playoff. You went through. You win the SEC. How are you going to say that this isn't an A when you win the SEC? You don't win the regular season title. That's what that was. That on that graphic there,
Mm-hmm.
SEC finish was you finished second in the regular season, right?
Yeah.
Behind Texas. Then you go to Atlanta, you beat Texas, even with Gunnar Stockton in the second half. So yeah. All right, Bossman, how can you give Georgia? I'm going to give them a B. I would go B because of what I've talked about earlier, right? I'm really weighing higher the fan expectations for my grades. And the fan expectations at Georgia are we don't get beat by Ole Miss 28-10. Ole Miss is not good. I'm just kidding, Ole Miss fans. All you Ole Miss fans watching, I'm just messing with you. I just wanted to raise your blood pressure for about 2 seconds. Ole Miss was very good this year. But for Georgia does not expect to lose to Ole Miss. Right? They don't. So losing to Ole Miss was a big deal, 20-10, getting blown out by Ole Miss. The play of Carson Beck throughout the year, extremely erratic, especially in that middle section of the year for the Bulldogs. And then the other thing, hey, you get a win against Georgia Tech. We get taken to 8 overtimes. I know I talked about it earlier. Haynes King is a baller. He's a winner. I love what Brent Key is doing at Georgia Tech and Atlanta. But guys, we're Georgia, right? We don't get taken to 8 OTs by Georgia Tech. Like, I think the fan base was pretty frustrated with how this season went. Even though you win the SEC, even though you get to, you get a bye in the SEC or in the college football playoff. But this fan base, even with the Gunnar Stockton, it's next man up for Georgia. This team has dudes everywhere, dudes across the roster, depth, all that stuff, right? And it's dwindled a little bit in the NIL era, but if you're talking about depth across the board and putting depth of Georgia's roster up against anybody else in the country, I think they beat just about everybody except for maybe two teams, and that would be Texas and Ohio State. And so for me, I think Georgia at a minimum expects to be in the quarterfinals, the semifinals, right? And they were only in the quarterfinals this year. So I would probably ding them a couple points. I'd probably put them at a B this year based on that fan expectation. And we can go back and look here. Also, right, a little bit of where the preseason expectation was from national media, which was win the national title. You got Carson Beck coming back. You got all these weapons. You got Trevor Etienne. You're expected to win the national title, and you finish, number 6 in the AP. So I would dock him just a little bit. Still a really good year, but according to Georgia's expectations and Georgia fan base expectations, just a little bit below an A for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, I think this one could have been, a little more not contentious, but there's more, I think, room there, for a different point of view to have a different view. I think, honestly, as I'm like looking at my grades here and hearing your rebuttals on both Tennessee and Georgia now, giving them a little bit lower than I did, I think part of my issue here is we're Aggies, A&M fans, and either one of these seasons that Tennessee or Georgia just had, I would kill for. So I see what a college football playoff 10-2, and I'm like, oh man, that would be awesome.
Yeah, A+.
Right. So that perhaps is shifting my judgment slightly, but anyway, I think that's enough on Georgia though. I think again, you can split hairs and there's certainly style points they were not high on this year, but at the end of the day, as we both agree, a very good season. And we'll see what they do in 2025 it seems like they're rolling with Gunnar Stockton. Mm-hmm. They do need to get that offense up a notch. And I'm interested to see if he's that guy, what they can do around him in 2025. We'll close it out on your end, at least. I've got one more team here, but we'll go to the other Columbia, and that is Missouri, led by Elia Drinkwitz, and you have given them a B for the 2024 season.
Yeah. What I'm finding out here is that I'm grading much harsher than you are. Not too much, but a little bit harsher than you are. So I want to hear your thoughts here on what you think Mizzou's grade is. But I gave him a B again, going back to fan expectations coming into this year. You got Brady Cook coming back. You got Luther Burden coming back. Theo Weiss. You got all these weapons on the offensive side of the ball. So much production is coming back. You were on the verge of the college football playoff, or at least in the conversation late in the year in 2023. You lose 2 games in 2023, and you get a big win over Ohio State in a bowl game. So coming into this year, expectations were playoff. That's where you heard Missouri fans talking, like, we have the team. This is the year. Let's get to the playoff. They didn't achieve that. So I think the fan base would be telling you, hey, it's a great year. Second straight double-digit win season under Elia Drinkwitz. And while most of the national media weren't talking about it, Elia Drinkwitz was talking about it late in the year. We only have 1 loss. Like, we should be we have 2 losses. We should be in the conversation for the college football playoff. And then they got beat by South Carolina in a close game, 34-30. But, going 10-3 is nothing to sniff at. So a very good season. I think even, given a B grade, a very good season. I think where fan expectations were a little bit off probably going into the year was how much they lost on the defensive side of the ball. And that showed up in a couple of the blowout games against Texas A&M, against Alabama, who shut them out, right? 34-0, absolutely crush them. So I think fan expectations were probably a little bit inflated based on all of the names, right? The headline names that were coming back this year. However, at the same time, you win 10 games. So it's hard to give them anything less than a B. I probably was a little bit too harsh on them, frankly. I probably could have given them a B plus, but I settled on a B here. And overall, I think there was a couple things that held Mizzou back this year. One was the defense, as I mentioned. Two was the running game and the offensive line, which was not as good as it was the year prior when you had Cody Shredder, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Cody Shredder in the backfield, who was an all SEC running back and, just played out of his mind in 2023. And this season, the rushing attack just didn't live up to those expectations. It did not match that level that they saw with Cody Schrader. So overall, I give Missouri a B. I think it was a good season overall, back-to-back 10-win seasons, double-digit win seasons, hard to sniff at. So overall, really good year for them, but I settled on a B because it was just under what fan expectations were for this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this is definitely another one where there could be some disagreement, but I'm kind of in line with you here because I think Missouri in particular coming into the year did have kind of, playoff or bust is probably a mischaracterization of what they thought or their fans thought, but it was darn close to kind of a playoff or bust like you mentioned. And I think what really, again, a 9-win season at Missouri is awesome. And 10 with a bowl, 2 back-to-back 10-win seasons is extremely impressive. But we can pull this up real quick here. What my biggest issue and why I agree with a B here, despite the 5-3 and SEC and 10-3 record here, is 41-10 at A&M and 34-0 at Alabama. They really did not play well against the top of the SEC with the exception of South Carolina. And that's even a stretch because I just said top of the SEC and A&M in the same sentence. So I think Missouri was a good team this year. They, fell short of the playoff expectations, but I think a lot of what helped them get to 10 wins was their schedule, because I think when they really were tested, they did not, meet the expectation. So I'm fine with a B here, even though, again, yes, take a step back here and look at the last decade or so of Mizzou football, and a 9-win season is very, very good. I think a B is totally fair there with what they brought back on offense, the preseason expectations, and then some of the blowout losses that came against, upper end SEC teams that they thought they were on par with.
And that A&M loss, by the way, was Connor Weigman starting, not Marcel Reed. So,
yeah, right.
I'm not even dogging on Connor Weigman to say that kid is terrible, right? But overall, like at the end of the day, he was not A&M's starting quarterback by the end of the year. And in two games, LSU and Notre Dame really, did not play very well. And even in some of the wins that he got, like against Mississippi State, didn't play very well. The fact that it was Mississippi State was the reason that A&M won. But he made a couple of mistakes in that game that, kind of kept Mississippi State in the game, frankly. And they shouldn't have been in that game at all. A&M should have blown them out. So just to remember, that A&M game, when they blew out Missouri, Connor Weigman was the starting quarterback. So that is a bad loss.
Yeah, that's a good call out there. That was a crazy game. I thought, again, as an Aggie, I thought, wow, Weigman's back. We're back. Everything's great. And then that did not pan out. That was sort of a flash in the pan for him this season. But hope he does well at Houston. No bad blood there. It did not work out this year for Weigman at A&M. Okay, let's go to our last team here. Also very interested to see what you think of this, because I think this is another one where there's potentially some leeway, and that's Florida. So I gave them a C-. And now that I'm looking at the SEC preseason odds and the finish, maybe I'm backtracking a little bit, but I'll stick with my C- here for the Gators. So I actually did not realize they were predicted to finish 11th and finished ahead of that at 10th. They, were never really ranked this year, so I'm not surprised to see that. Obviously, DJ Lagway's emergence is a bright spot for them this season, and moving forward, he instills a lot of hope and confidence in that team and fan base. And they did have 4 straight wins in the season. I just kind of looked at this as Napier saved his job with the way they finished the season. 4 straight wins is phenomenal. But on the whole, they went 7-5 in his 3rd season at Florida. And they lost at home in blowout fashion to their rival Miami. They lost at home to double digits to A&M. They got blown out by Texas. I think, there's some possible grace here because when Lagway played, they were better, and there was even that stretch where he was playing, but then got hurt, and they were on the transfer from Yale, who, God bless him, had no idea what he was doing, and they lost a couple games there. I think that the Texas game and then the back half of that Georgia game. So again, they had a tough schedule. I kind of looked at this almost similar to how I was a little bit lower on, maybe Oklahoma than you, but this is Florida, and this is Napier's 3rd year, and you go, was it 7-5 or 6-6? I don't even
8-5 with the bowl win.
Yeah, so 7-5 regular season. I just don't think that's good enough, and I get why. Of course, he's kept his job. The momentum that they built, and Lagway's a special player. I have a hard time giving a good grade out to a 3rd-year coach that goes 7-5 at Florida, and when you look at their schedule here, like, we don't even have the Florida State game because that was just an automatic dub. But like I said, they just didn't really have, I would say, outside of, I guess, the Ole Miss and maybe LSU, but these are games that they should win, right? Florida State was terrible. Ole Miss, that was a great win. LSU, it's at home, that was a team, that I would say coming into the year, that's a game they should expect to win. Get blown out by Texas, kind of competed with Georgia, like I said, until Lagway went down, beat up on a bad Kentucky, gave Tennessee a heck of a game. I'll give them that. But, UCF, Mississippi State, Samford, I think that is, doesn't instill a ton of confidence. I don't know. I guess I'll kick it over to you. I don't have a ton more to say. So what do you think? Would you be a little more lenient on the Gators?
Well, you're lenient on everybody else except for, poor old Billy Napier tonight. So I don't know, what your problem with him is, but I think I would give him actually a higher grade. And I go back, I actually like that we have our own criteria here to grade because it makes for, a fun back and forth to figure out, kind of why we came to the conclusions that we did. But for me, fan expectations, right? That's been my thing. That's fan expectation along with a little bit of the national media. National media was burying him. Said he was a dead man walking. I said he was a dead man walking. I thought he was going to get fired after the Texas A&M game.
Yep.
Texas A&M with a backup quarterback walks in there, Marcel Reed, and, make them look like fools. They smoked them. 33-20, I think, was the final score there.
Yeah,
so,
and that was some garbage time scores by Florida. I think that was 33-6 or something in the second half, and then Florida scored a couple touchdowns late.
That's right. So you get 2 blowout losses, right, to start the year, and a sandwich win with the Samford Bulldogs in between there. So I'm thinking he's done for. He gets the dreaded vote of confidence from Scott Strickland, and then he reels off a bunch of wins. He just starts building brick by brick by brick. And, I think it probably would have finished the same, honestly, if Graham Mertz had still been in the lineup. I think Graham Mertz was actually playing at a fairly high level, when he went down. But DJ Lagway is just somebody who has that it factor. And so I think, I just said Graham Mertz had him playing at a level I think they would have stayed at. I think they would have stayed still at a high level, probably would have finished similar. But DJ Lagway even still had a little bit more, right? He just has that it factor that just brings it up another notch. There's players like this that come around once in a generation, and I do think that DJ Lagway could be a generational talent. And we saw flashes of that late in the year, right? I mean, okay, sure. Let's think about this. Fan expectations. I would have said fans expecting probably a 5-7 type of year to start the year, right?
Yeah.
You end up 7-5. So flip that on its head, right? Like 7-5, you get a bowl win against Tulane. You win four straight games to end the year, including the bowl game. You beat LSU. You beat Ole Miss, right? Like that's 2 big wins. You have Tennessee on the ropes in DJ Lagway's first start. I mean, you should have beat them, frankly. Like you had them on the ropes in Neyland Stadium. So that was great. Now there were a couple of big roadblocks, right? Big problems here. One of those was against A&M, which we mentioned. The other one against Texas, and I thought maybe Texas, they might fire him, right? Like 49-17. Not great. That's not how you want to be if you're Florida. Florida should not be losing to Texas that bad. They view themselves as being on the level of a program like Texas. So that wasn't great. However, you also beat your rival Florida State. And I know Florida State was down. I know they were terrible. But the previous season, right, 2023, they should have been a playoff team. They were right on the cusp of being a playoff team. So it's always a great year when you get to beat the Florida State Seminoles if you're a Gator. And then you add on top of that, you beat Ole Miss, which is a top 10 team. I think maybe at that point they were like number 13 or something, right? But huge win nonetheless. LSU, always good as a Florida Gator when you beat LSU. So I think that according to fan expectations, based on fan expectations, putting it up against that overall, Billy Napier exceeded expectations this year. And I think the fans are actually excited, for once, probably for the first time since they actually hired the guy a couple of years ago. So I would give them a B. I think I'd arrive at a B. So I'd go a little bit higher than you on this one overall. But I do understand where you were coming from, talking about, explaining why you got to a C-, because this is the Florida Gators, right? 7-5 doesn't cut it. You're Florida. You have all this pedigree going back to the Spurrier years. Heisman was Spurrier in the 50s, 90s. You were controlling the SEC with Spurrier and those offenses. And then you have the Urban Meyer years where if they weren't breaking out of jail, they were winning national titles. So I get it. I understand why you arrived at C-, but based on fan expectations, I would have gone a little bit higher.
I think that's fair because I do think you're right in that the fans did not expect really to even go bowling because they had a really tough schedule. So that's totally fair. I think for me, again, it's more just the third year type of a thing. If this was his first or second year, I would have been, much higher. I just thought, third year, 7-5 is tough at Florida. But that's why we grade these individually, and we can chat about it and disagree and, hear another perspective. So any Gator fans out there, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought, because I think that's one of the more fascinating cases this year of low expectations, horrendous start, strong finish. When you look back, as a Gator fan, what do you think of the year that was in 2024? So that's it for our grades this week. So we've now graded all the teams in the SEC. If you missed our episode last week, it's on our YouTube channel. Please go give that a watch. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a couple segments to close out. So we're going back to the Muschamp Coach of the Week with a basketball coach, actually. So I'll kick it to you to intro this clip since you pulled it up.
Okay, so we're a little bit behind, right? Because basketball moves a little faster than football. But basketball last week, I believe it was on Saturday, the Aggies, Texas A&M, played Arkansas in Reed Arena. John Calipari coming to Reed Arena, and it was a pretty close game going up to late in the second half, and there was a pivotal play where off a timeout, Texas A&M ended up shooting a three, and it really kind of broke the game open and was a turning point in the game and kind of solidified the win for A&M. And so Coach Cal was showing a little bit of he was very frustrated with how this went down and how they could come off a timeout and end up getting this wide open three that ended up being the dagger in Arkansas. And so I just thought his explanation of what happened was pretty funny and Will Muschamp-esque. So here it is.
The out-of-bounds play for the three. My guy that was supposed to go just didn't go, and he came over and he said, "My fault." Was that like a turning point in the game? Yeah. Your fault.
Yep, that's pretty good. Yeah.
No chit. Yeah, no
Yeah.
chit. It was your fault.
Right. Yeah. Clearly it was your fault, dude.
So yeah, I had trouble finding the clip. I don't know if anybody clipped it for social media in terms of the 3-pointer that was the dagger, but I was watching the game and remember that play and know exactly what he's talking about. And the kid who was supposed to be out on the 3-point line, who gave up the wide open three, was inexplicably in the key. and so he comes off the court. Yeah, my bad, coach. That was my fault. Yeah, it was your fault.
Yeah.
So I can absolutely see Will Muschamp saying something like that in a press conference after a bad loss, as he did similar things many times during his tenure at Florida and South Carolina.
Absolutely. No, that's a great clip. We love it. And SEC basketball is red hot. So I'm sure y'all been watching. We've been watching too. Maybe we'll incorporate some of that stuff as we get closer to conference tournament and NCAA tournament time. But yeah, that was good stuff. Glad to have that back. We'll try to keep that going as much as we can. It's just, without football season, it's a little harder to get, the press conferences with games multiple times a week. And there's not clips like that every week either. So shout out to Coach Cal for giving us some fodder there. All right, well, we'll close it out with our biscuit of the week. So if y'all are watching and have a biscuit you want to send in, be that homemade or a local spot that you like, we'd love to shout those out, shout out our viewers, shout out wherever you're getting your favorite biscuits. Obviously, we're Biscuits in SEC, a little bit of a play on biscuits and gravy, but we love biscuits here. And I, this past Saturday, went out for kind of like a post Valentine's Day brunch. We didn't actually go out on Valentine's Day, my girlfriend and I, but we went out Saturday morning to Lucille's Creole Cafe in Fort Collins, where I just moved. It's a nice little Cajun restaurant in an old house. The chef is from New Orleans, so a true Cajun and trained in Cajun food. So by my standards, it was pretty dang authentic and pretty dang good. So what you're looking at here is the Cajun breakfast, consisting of, it was literally on the menu, it said red beans with meat. So I think it was some kind of like ham hock meat in the red beans. Jalapeno cheddar grits, and then 2 poached eggs covered in hollandaise, and of course a buttermilk biscuit with some jam on the side. So that was a delicious Saturday morning breakfast. And if any of y'all are ever up in Fort Collins and need some Southern Cajun food, I recommend Lucille's.
God dang, that looks incredible. Was that just a little bit of jelly they had there for the biscuit, or were you sopping it up with the biscuit? I mean, when you sent me that picture earlier, I was trying to figure out what that actually was, because it looked fantastic. Looked like there were some eggs in there too, but I had no idea what that concoction was.
Yeah. So like I said, red beans with some meat, jalapeno cheddar grits, poached eggs and hollandaise, and then a biscuit. Yeah, that's just some jam back there to smother your biscuit in. I did sop up a little bit of the beans and grits and egg yolk with the biscuit, but it was phenomenal. I mean, who doesn't want to eat red beans and grits for breakfast, right? So I was thrilled.
Day.
Right. I was thrilled to see some authentic Cajun food. So as I said, highly recommend that establishment. So shout out to Lucille's in Fort Collins. All right. Well, I think that will do it this week. We're a little bit over time, but that's fine. We'll give you all some extra football talk. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Be sure to, as we mentioned before, we would really appreciate it if you'd sign up for our newsletter. Of course, if you're watching over on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We appreciate the support. And we'll be back next Wednesday, same time. So we'll see y'all then. For Bossman, I'm Hammer. Peace out, y'all. Have a good rest of the week.
See y'all next week.